Good evening, everybody. It's 7 o'clock on Monday, March 6th, and we'll call this regular meeting of the Sault Ste. Marie City Commission to order. If we could have a roll call, please.
Mayor Gary.
Here.
Commissioner Bauer.
Here.
Commissioner Bospis Rath.
Here.
Commissioner Habusta.
Here.
Commissioner Marble.
Here.
Commissioner Miller.
Here.
Commissioner Rubenstein.
Here.
Everybody's here. If everybody that can stand, would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, everybody. Item 4 is mayor comments and general announcements. I just have one quick one, and we've seen a lot of pretty significant arrests in the news media lately, and I'd just like to give our thanks to Chief Bierling and the Sault Ste. Marie Police Department, Sheriff Bittnar, and the Chippewa County Sheriff Department, and all the people that participate in Trident, and all the law enforcement agencies in the area. We certainly appreciate all your hard work and diligence in trying to keep this community clean. We'll go on to item B, proclamations and recognitions. So, since 2017, the U.S. Coast Guard Integration Committee has been working on a variety of initiatives that are geared towards further integrating U.S. Coast Guard members into the community and enhancing communication and collaboration among a variety of partners, including the Coast Guard, the city, the EDC, Sault Area Public Schools, and others. We did take a little bit of a hiatus during COVID, but we're hoping to get back with our meetings. One of the ideas that the working group came up with was to recognize exceptional U.S. Coast Guard volunteers during a city commission meeting to demonstrate appreciation for the work that Coast Guard members do within this community. This is the fourth of such recognitions. The previous awardees were Russell Post, Cameron Stokely, and Scotty Colton. With us today are Captain Anthony Jones and Matthew Vieira. If you could meet us at the podium, please.
All right. How do we want to? I just want to say a couple words. First, thank you so much for this award and for recognizing the Coast Guard and the interactions that we have with the community. We really enjoy and cherish being a part of the community, and this just helps to solidify that partnership. Matt came to us as a Lieutenant JG in the Coast Guard, which is an O2 for anybody that's in the military. And as often is the case, he came with a little bit of a healthy skepticism as far as what he was getting into coming to Sault Ste. Marie. And it ended up that he loved it so much here, he decided to turn in his blue suit for a civilian suit and now works as a civilian over at the sector. So he will be a part of this community for many years to come. When Matt got here, he was a former wrestler at the Coast Guard Academy, and he saw a need within the community, within the school, to provide some of that additional coaching for the wrestling program. And especially during the COVID years, the program struggled immensely, as did the school athletics in general. And he stepped up and ensured that the kids were getting instruction safely, but spent over 1,000 hours supporting the wrestling programs in the Sioux. And in addition to that, was able to raise over $4,000 to help those kids continue to wrestle and be competitive, and plans to continue to do that into the future. So again, I thank you so much for your efforts in recognizing Coast Guard members in the community, and I present to you Matthew Vieira.
On behalf of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, we have a plaque that signifies your Volunteer of the Year status. It's in recognition of your dedication to volunteerism and improving the lives of those in your community. Congratulations and thank you. Want to say any words, or it's optional?
Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, guys. Thank you very much. Glad you chose to stick around Sault Ste. Marie. Okay, now we'll move into item C, which is public comment. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to make any comments on any of the scheduled agenda items? Yes. I'm gonna make a wild guess. Well, that one's a hearing, so, correct?
Yeah, I would say,
Yeah.
yeah, I would do it as a hearing.
Okay. So we'll do that one as a hearing, so anybody can come up and speak to that one, yeah? All right. Anybody else like to speak to any of the scheduled agenda items? All right. Moving on into item D, which is the consent agenda. Deputy City Manager Robin Troyer.
Thank you, Mayor. Under the consent agenda, 1, approval of the City Commission meeting minutes of February 20th, 2023. Item 2, consideration to apply for an Eagle Community Energy Management Grant. Item 3 is consideration of cruise ship security agreement extension. Item 4 is authorization for the Downtown Development Authority to apply for match on Main Street grant program. Item 5 is from the Downtown Development Authority, request to transfer DDA sign improvement capital project funds to downtown mural capital project funds. And item 6 is approval of the consent agenda items as presented.
Thank you, Deputy City Manager. Would any commissioner like any of those items further explained or removed for individual consideration? Commissioner Miller.
I was wondering if the city manager could explain a little more to me what number 2 is.
Sure. City Manager.
Let me just get the item really quick. So number 2 is a grant through Eagle, which is our state environmental agency. The grant is to replace the lighting throughout City Hall with LEDs. The grant is 100% reimbursable up to $25,000. So we would look to do a project for about that much and have the grant cover $25,000 worth of the work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Commissioner Bauer.
So moved, we adopt tonight's consent agenda.
Support.
It's been moved and supported to adopt the consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Consent agenda passed. Moving into E, special orders of business. City Manager Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight for first reading is an item related to the proposed form-based code for the downtown district area. Director Freeman has a presentation that he'll walk the commission through, talks about the process, kind of highlights what's in the form-based code. I would recommend after that, open it up to public comment once the presentation is done, but there's a lot of attachments in your item. The PowerPoint is included in there. There's the most recent draft of the form-based code, as well as a couple flow charts for different building development activities, frequently asked questions, the master plan visual preference survey, and some, what else is there? And that's about it. So as we go through, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt Director Freeman, and we'll be happy to answer them. But without further ado, I will turn it over to Director Freeman.
Good evening, Kelly.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Been a while. So the city adopted a new master plan back in 2017, and in the run-up to that process, there was a survey that was sent out across the community asking questions of people who wanted to respond on a number of topics, including the downtown. These two here specifically were related to preserving and enhancing the character of the downtown as being important. And then on the right, that the exteriors of newly constructed or significantly renovated buildings in the downtown be consistent with the character of what's already here. Both of these questions were answered by a little over 370 respondents. And you can see down at the bottom that there was a large segment that agreed with the sentiments expressed on both of these questions. So this was kind of our basis for moving forward. Then as we got into our open houses as part of the master plan process, we set up a series of photographs for people to look at and respond to of buildings that would be permitted under today's zoning ordinance and their appropriateness for downtown. For ease of interpretation, because the text is showing up kind of small, I put a red dot next to the comments that were negative, yellow dot for neutral comments, and green dot for positive comments. You can see here the strip mall style development really didn't attract a whole lot of positive attention, nor did the more modern glass look building, nor did the older style building with vinyl on it. A lot of the comments on that photograph were related to the vinyl siding on the building. Surprisingly, a lot of the modern forms of architecture with traditional styles did not get a lot of positive responses from the people who chose to participate. They really liked, as you can see in number 6, the more traditional styles of architecture, traditional materials, that kind of thing. Metal buildings, terribly unpopular, as you can see. A lot of the commentary on the middle building was about the need for it to be rehabbed, and then it would be conceivably quite nice. Again, strong preferences toward the traditional forms of architecture that you see on the outside pictures. Not a lot of love for the idea of a Dollar General in the downtown, as you can see from the comments in the center photo. So based on those bits of feedback from the community, there was a strong indication of broad support for traditional architecture styles and traditional building materials for future downtown buildings. So to that end, the city issued an RFP and engaged with McKenna & Associates for the purpose of writing a form-based code for the downtown. The bulk of the work of creating that code, or at least the groundwork for it, the information gathering was done over 4 days at the Ojibwe in May of 2018. People who came to that underwent or participated in a number of exercises, mental maps of downtown, so basically draw the downtown from memory, and that kind of sussed out what people thought was important to include and what they didn't think it was important to include. Exercises on defining the character of different areas of the downtown, as well as a group that went around the downtown on foot identifying buildings that people didn't like and buildings that people did like, with the idea being that the buildings that people did like would be used to inform the architectural requirements built into the building types for new construction occurring later on. So throughout the remainder of 2018 and into 2019, staff worked with McKenna to modify the code. Plans were in spring of 2020 that we would roll it out for public review, but then everything kind of ground to a halt. And it was kind of shelved until things got better. Earlier this year, McKenna was the successful respondent on our Parks and Rec Master Plan RFP, and the significant staff overlap in that meant that they would be able to come up, do their work, their public engagement for the Parks and Rec Master Plan, and do work on the FBC at the same time. So it was a good time to get that back off the shelf and get it going. So we took the latest draft, put it on the city's website, and sent invitations to attend either in-person or online sessions to all of the property owners within the area of the proposed rezoning, about 170 of them. Our 2 in-person sessions and online sessions were held back in October. Our in-person sessions had about 10 to 15. with our 2 online sessions about 30 to 40 across the 2 sessions. And of course, we got a lot of questions, a lot of good comments and feedback during those sessions. And of course, afterward, there was quite a bit of follow-up on it, and anybody who had any questions, wanted to talk to me, speak about the specific ramifications for their buildings relative to the code, I met with a lot of people, a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, a lot of in-persons. So incorporating all those comments, there was a new draft prepared prior to the Planning Commission's formal public hearing on December 1st. Again, another round of mailers was sent out. That draft was uploaded to the website, asking people to come to the Planning Commission meeting on December 1 for the public hearing and to hear comments. So about 15 people signed in on the December 1st Planning Commission meeting. A lot of good comments. There were some things that the Planning Commission wanted staff to address prior to taking action on the document itself. So prior to the close of the meeting on December 1st, it was announced that the Planning Commission would reconvene at their next regular meeting, which was January 26th of 2023, to take up staff recommendations to address those concerns that were heard on December 1st. Had a good meeting on January 26th, walked through responses to every single question or concern that was expressed at the December 1st meeting. However, there was no public in attendance at that January meeting. So based on the feedback from the Planning Commission members in January, we scheduled the final consideration for the form-based code for February 23rd. Third round of mailers was sent out along with the December 1st draft being online and the document that I created outlining the changes made based on the comments from December 1st meeting and the January 26th meeting. So that went out again, so third round of mailing to all the owners in the downtown area. So from the January meeting, there was kind of an unfinished discussion regarding the historic preservation standards that are in the form-based code, specifically applying to contributing buildings. So up until that point, the staff recommendation, or what was baked into the code, was that there'd be some kind of value of the building versus value of the project trigger, that below which the preservation standards wouldn't apply and above which they would. There was an alternative method offered by a member of the public that would use 50% of the replacement value of the building. Both values would be established by the city assessor, so there'd be no ambiguity as to where that line was. Ultimately, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to remove the trigger altogether and make those preservation standards apply to exterior modifications on all contributing buildings regardless of the cost. And then shortly thereafter, the Planning Commission, there was a motion made to approve it, which was unsuccessful on a 3-3 vote with no motions following that. So ultimately, the Planning Commission was unable to reach a recommendation on the form-based code at that meeting. We did have 2 members who were not in attendance at that meeting. So what I'm working on now is trying to find a time where everybody who is on the Planning Commission can get together, so a recommendation can be made by the full board, and due to member availability, that would not be any sooner than April 4th, hence the delayed second reading date in the packet. So presently, we have a conventional type zoning ordinance. It was adopted in 1965. Obviously, we've made a number of changes to it since then, but it is relatively old. That type of zoning ordinance has at its core, as its organizing principle, the separation of incompatible uses. You have your residential, your commercial, and your industrial, and you do not mix the two because that creates problems. So the land use is really the centerpiece of that type of zoning ordinance. And because of that, it really doesn't set itself up well to provide protections for character in areas where a city desires that to be a higher priority. Shared with permission, this is a rendering of a building that received its Planning Commission approval back in 2015 for construction on Portage Avenue. This individual ended up going into existing building with his project or his business rather than construct a new one. However, this just kind of shows to demonstrate that the existing zoning ordinance really doesn't have the ability to direct the character of new buildings into the downtown as it sits. And where that preservation of character is the aim, that's really where a form-based code is the preferred tool, because its primary focus is on the compatibility of buildings with their surroundings, the relationship to the street, and their appearance. Use is still regulated, but it takes a back seat to those other facets. Looking at some of our peer communities, Marquette has 2 form-based districts, one centered on Front Street in the downtown, and the other the 3rd Street corridor north of downtown. Their downtown one they adopted in 2008, and the 3rd Street corridor more recently in 2017. Traverse City's had form-based elements in their downtown zoning since 1999. Petoskey adopted a form-based code for their downtown in 2013, and Alpena back in 2010 adopted a form-based overlay to protect the character of their downtown. Some other locations, Escanaba does regulate exterior materials and main door locations in their downtown. Houghton does have form-based elements in their code, but they are by suggestion. They're not compulsory. Gaylord, which we all have a familiarity with, requires certain styles of architecture in their commercial zoning districts. Same with Frankenmuth. Frankenmuth has chosen to go the extra step and have a local historic district established to give them an extra degree of regulatory authority over things. I'm not recommending that here. And then Mount Pleasant replaced their entire zoning ordinance with a citywide zoning ordinance, form-based code ordinance in 2018, which is still in place today. So in terms of what is proposed here for Sault Ste. Marie, there are 2 major paths depending on the nature of the building, that being existing buildings and then new buildings and additions to existing buildings. First and foremost, if this is adopted, the owners of existing buildings would not be required to initiate any projects to bring their buildings into compliance with the form-based code. They are grandfathered in as they sit the day of adoption, and anything that they want to do is their choice to initiate. An interesting example of this, Little Italy was developed prior to the city's adoption of its first zoning ordinance in 1927. Those houses didn't comply with the 1927 ordinance. They don't comply with the 1965 ordinance. So those have been non-conforming uses for the better part of the last 100 years. They can stay there, continue to exist, continue to be occupied and maintained as they sit. Additionally, the scope of a project that a property owner undertakes would not be required to be expanded upon to address shortcomings in the form-based code. So to the extent possible, we try to give as much latitude to existing building owners as we could. One of the things that came out of the December 1st Planning Commission meeting was some additional clarity on what types of activities would be exempted from regulation by the code. For the most part, these are all maintenance items. There's a lot of things in buildings that are of a shorter lifespan than the buildings themselves: doors, windows, roof, parking lots, awnings, awning fabrics, HVAC equipment. So it was important to specifically call out this list of things as things that people could do without having to worry about compliance with the form-based code. There's no gotchas in the code. Of particular note, number 15 allows the replacement of up to a quarter of the area of non-conforming exterior material with like type and color in a 12-month period, and that'll become a little bit more important later on as we get into this. So this is the top part of the flow chart for existing buildings. So first of all, this has to start with somebody initiating a project, or if you're changing a tenant or making modifications to the outside of your building, you'd start here. We have our permitted use table. a table to speak to permitted materials, and then you would review, and they'll be baked into the code, the maps that were put together as part of the establishment of the Downtown Historic District several years ago, because the contributing structures will take one path, and then the non-contributing structures and those not in the district will take a second path. Speaking to the materials, one of the big changes in this code is that vinyl siding and metal siding would not be permitted as exterior building materials going forward in the future. They're not durable in the context of a downtown building, and they can't be repaired. When metal siding gets bent, it's bent, and that's something that you can't fix. When vinyl siding breaks or gets damaged, you have to replace that piece. You can't just repair it. Hopefully you have some extras laying around, but depending on the age of the installation, there's no guarantees that the color will even match anymore. Of course, if you have a building with these materials already, you can keep them indefinitely if you like. Anything else on the outside of buildings is allowed outside of those two things. So here's our historic district map. This is Spruce and North, and Spruce and South. This goes down as far as Ann Street. I'll get back to the highlighted part at the end, but I wanted to kind of touch on some of these other things. So if somebody has a contributing building and they want to replace their storefront altogether, they can either go back to an original configuration from some point in the past, or conform to this list of requirements. The major things are actually pretty short, 1, 2, and 3. 60% glass between 2 and 10 feet. Storefront doorway has to be at least 3 feet off, so that way you're not opening your door out into the sidewalk. And then your storefront glass 24 inches above grade, to make sure it's high enough that nothing happens to it in terms of like snow removal and whatnot. If you're modifying the storefront, it's more or less try to keep it and preserve as much of the original configuration as possible. And there may be an occasion, the old Central Savings Bank building with the granite or the marble on the first floor is a good example of something that is not original to the building but has taken on kind of a historic importance of its own. So leaving things like that intact are perfectly acceptable. And here's just kind of the graphic that accompanies that list. Signage, lighting, and awnings. Again, just like siding, people can keep their signs and their awnings and their lighting as it is, but when the time comes to make changes to it, this is the list of things to comply with, and it's pretty similar to what's in place today. And then lastly, additions in the non-exempt accessory buildings would have to perform or conform to the preferred building type allowed in the district. One important thing for the non-contributing or buildings not in the district is they follow substantially the same path, minus compliance with these requirements. So 201B is the historic preservation standards in the code, and these basically mirror the Secretary of the Interior standards for historic building preservation. So they're focused on minimizing changes to the character of historic buildings to retain them. They would not require the restoration of missing historic features from buildings that were already gone before the adoption of the code. As I mentioned already, previous drafts of the form-based code had some kind of work value versus building value threshold before these would become applicable. Both of those went to the Planning Commission last month. They decided to go a different route, removing the trigger altogether. An argument in favor of having a trigger is that significant high-dollar projects are more than likely when big changes may be made to the exterior of a building. The argument against having a trigger is that, you know, a guy with a hammer and a chisel in an afternoon can do a lot of damage to the historic integrity of a building without going across that trigger, meaning that any damage that was done to a building in terms of its historic character is something that would just be lost. We would not be able to This is the flow chart for new buildings. Pretty simple. Identify your zoning district, pick a building type from the list of those allowed in the district, and then follow the instructions. This is an example of the retail building type. Gives you kind of a graphical representation, a list of specific requirements, some numerical parameters here, your permitted allowable exterior materials, and then your permitted uses. Under the present ordinance, all new construction over 3,500 square feet requires planning commission approval. One of the changes to this document, that if somebody came in with a project that met all these requirements and all the specifications in the code, is they get to skip planning commission regardless of size. Depending on the timing, that could shave as much as a month off the development process. And given our climate, which allows ample opportunity for outdoor construction activities, sarcasm, that could be a very meaningful amount of time for somebody. If, for instance, somebody wanted to deviate from the code requirements, the Planning Commission is authorized to waive those. There are 3 standards that are listed here, and the Planning Commission has to find that they only meet 2. So it's a fairly low threshold for people's ability to do that. One of the other big changes is parking. Right now, the zoning ordinance requires parking under all circumstances. There is a reduction allowed in the downtown core area, excluding West Portage across from the locks and Ashman south of the canal. Under the form-based code, if it's adopted, residential, lodging, and office uses would still be required to provide some form of minimum parking, pretty similar to the B2 50% rule. However, retail uses, restaurants and bars, and civic uses would not be required to provide any on-site parking at all if they so desired. Instead, there would be a parking maximum put in place. So the removal of the parking requirements for those types of uses would open up options for existing businesses to repurpose their outdoor spaces for outdoor seating, construction of an addition, or some other purpose. Additionally, it would increase development opportunities for smaller parcels in the downtown. Parking occupies a ton of space, often needlessly, so turning that back over to property owners to do something more productive with, I think is a good decision to make. So just to kind of wrap things up, if this is adopted, all buildings will be grandfathered in as they exist. So property owners will be legally entitled to keep what they have until they initiate a project to do otherwise. Certainly the FBC would not require the expansion of scope beyond what a property owner wanted to do on their property in terms of a project. So in terms of a staff recommendation, it would be nice to get some direction from the City Commission relative to where it stands on the applicability of the historic preservation standards and when those are appropriate to come into play. I do have a comparison table of the TCV method versus the 50% method if that becomes of value. Provide us any direction in terms of addressing any issues that the Commission identifies. And then schedule a second reading for the April 17th City Commission meeting to allow us to get the Planning Commission back together and hopefully return to you with a recommendation at that time. That pretty much wraps it up for me, unless there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Anything, City Manager, or should we? Mr. Wilkes, would you like to come up and make any comments? We'll open it up to the public at this time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to talk. So as you can imagine, I'm in the current form, given what's happened at the Planning Commission meeting, very much opposed to the adoption of these codes. And I was looking at Kelly's presentation. I think first and foremost, the big thing that's occurred is you're not answering the question from 5 years ago anymore, because you do not have a definition of what substantially modifying means or substantially renovating a building. And so with the removal of any financial or test for what that is, whether it's 50% replacement cost or true cash value or whatever it is. You know, you're now in a world where I believe when you pull a building permit now, you're gonna have to apply some of these types of codes for especially the facades. So I think that the original question you asked in 2018, which was for new or significantly renovated structures, of course the public is gonna be interested in seeing those meet some standard. New, and there's no issue with new structures, right? We all understand that. It's the existing ones of which we have high interest in, and what is a substantially modified or substantially renovated structure. So now we really are in a world where don't know what that is. And I'm assuming at this point, for lack of a better understanding, and I really haven't had a chance to dialogue with Kelly on this subject, so maybe not be quite fair to him, but I don't really know what that means as far as, you know, the permit process when we want to go renovate a building. You know, how are we going to be affected by that as a building owner? I think the other thing that is still gnawing at me quite a bit is I'm really still struggling with trying to understand what the benefit is to the private property owners and the cost to the private property owners, the benefit to the city, the cost to the city, and the benefit to the public and the cost to the public. I haven't seen that laid out in any, I think Kelly's trying to make some attempts to do that, but it's really important that in order to sell something like this to the private property owners, that you give them an understanding of what the benefit is to them, right? And what some type of cost is gonna be to them, because there will be costs to this. There's no question about that. However you wanna go at that, but there are gonna be costs to private property owners for adoption of these codes, especially in their present form, when there's no economic or financial threshold anymore for enforcement of them. Okay? That's all I had. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mr. Wilkes. Anybody else in the audience that would like to make any comments? Sure. You state your name for the record, Dana.
Hi, Dana Sanderson. And I want to say a few things quickly before you start my timer. I know I have a limited amount of time. I have something I'm going to read tonight. Ordinarily, I wouldn't read it, but I've been sick with a stomach flu for about 5 days, so this is the best I could come up with, so I'm just going to read this quickly, but I will do my best not to go over my time period. So I'm here tonight to speak in favor of form-based code, and I will say that as I was practicing this, I kept calling it Facebook. So if I refer to it in that way, it's form-based code. That's my intent. For me, form-based code is a reality, not theory. In the last 6 years, my husband Terry and I have purchased and developed 5 historic properties. Right now, we are looking at our 6th. They're looking for a 6th property. So we have a really good idea of what the local building stock is like. We've toured most of the buildings in this community, and we also have a really good idea what it takes to rehabilitate a historic building. We have self-funded virtually all of our projects. We had one match on Main grant for $25,000. Other than that, we funded them all independently. So if I'm honest with all of you, or if you're honest with me, how many of you have had people say to you, why can't we be more like Petoskey? Put your hand up if you've heard that. I think we've all heard it. I hear it all the time. And the reason that we're not like Petoskey is that we're Sault Ste. Marie. And I think that what we need to do is we need to look at some of these other communities like Grand Rapids, Lansing, East Lansing, Marquette, Charlevoix, Traverse City, and the Holy Grail, Petoskey, that everybody, we should be more like Petoskey. And we should say, we don't have to be like Petoskey, we have to be like Sault Ste. Marie. And my belief is that form-based code would help us to regain some of that identity, because we are such an amazing and historic community, and we're not utilizing a lot of what we actually already have. So I know that sometimes opponents of form-based code will state that it stifles development and prevents property owners from being able to make updates. But have you ever been to Petoskey, Marquette, Charlevoix? Have you been to any Grand Rapids, East Lansing? Have you seen any stagnation in their development? I mean, I haven't. I've been to all of those cities many times. And to me, it seems that the development and progress is happening all the time, and their commercial property values also continue to rise in all of those areas, which is not true in Sault Ste. Marie. Form-based code is designed to create a high-quality public realm. Basically put, it's supposed to make our city more, more enjoyable for visitors and residents, more attractive and more valuable. That's what form-based code in its base is designed to do. It's not an immediate fix. It actually takes years before you begin to see the positive impact of that. I may not even still be alive. Who knows when, especially if this flu I'm not contagious, so I just want, no one has to worry. But it definitely is something that takes time to see. Is there a higher cost associated with doing form-based code, with implementing form-based code? Yes, there is. But it's not impossible. They're not impossible costs. And Terry and I have found many what I would call hacks, ways to meet the historic preservation standards without having to spend inordinate amounts of money. As I said, we have self-funded all of our projects because we don't do workarounds, but we find ways to make things work. And there are many, many ways to meet these historic preservation standards without having to break the bank. Slapping vinyl siding on a building and calling it urban renewal has not served our downtown well in the past, and there's no reason for us to think that that is really going to be any more successful moving forward. It is not a successful technique or a way for a community to make their community a better, more cohesive and admirable place to be. It just doesn't work. I know some people say that when they look at this form-based code, it's overwhelming in the detail, there's too much, and it's over-regulating. And have any of you ever sat down, not you, but anybody, ever sat down and actually looked at zoning code or building code? If anyone sat down with the building code and just read it from front to back, they probably would never build anything because it's overwhelming. All code is overwhelming. This code, as it's been developed so thoughtfully, was developed with the idea that all of the work was done up front, all of the detail exists, these modifications that have been done, all of it has been done in such a way that there will not be misinterpretation moving forward. It's there, it's easy to understand. So developers and anybody who is going to be impacted by form-based code can easily look at the code when it is completed, and they will know exactly what the expectation is, which I think is incredibly important. Our community, in my opinion, has devalued our history and our historic buildings for too long. Form-based code is going to give us an opportunity to create what I'm calling a playbook. When I attended the Charrettes in 2018, we had a different mayor, we had a different city manager, and we had an almost completely different city commission. So it's natural that these positions, people come and go from these positions. By creating and implementing form-based code, it will allow us more of a playbook moving forward for development so that we don't have the kinds of changes like that structure that Kelly showed that somebody was interested in putting on Portage. If that doesn't make your skin crawl, I don't know what does. It's an attractive building, but it has no place in Sault Ste. Marie in our historic areas, on Portage, on Ashman. No compatibility with existing properties, and compatibility is really what form-based code is trying to achieve. So by having form-based code, we're also going to give any prospective developers a clear understanding of what our expectations as a city are. Hopefully that would lead them to know that we're not a place where you can come in and put up a subpar property. We don't want subpar properties. We want developers who want to come in and work with the cohesiveness of what we expect. We need to set the bar much, much, much higher than we have. And I think that if we do that, a lot of people will rise to the expectations, and we'll all benefit from that. And we'll benefit very specifically in ways like having a downtown that is more user-friendly. We don't have to be like Petoskey. We can be like Sault Ste. Marie and have people coming to Sault Ste. Marie and wandering through our downtown. And no offense to anyone intended here, but we don't need a muffler shop on the main street. And that is what form-based code over a period of time will help us to bring back a much more historic and attractive downtown core. The adoption of form-based code will allow us to become better and to become more like the city that we should be because of our historic significance. And I think that right now you have the opportunity to make that happen. Form-based code is a tool that can be used by the city to allow us to become a better community, a more attractive and more valuable community than we are right now. So when the opportunity is presented, I ask you, please think about this and choose wisely and choose on the side of Sault Ste. Marie and what we should become. Thank you.
Thanks, Dana. Anybody else in the audience that have any comments? Terry? Sure. Come on up.
My name is Terry Sanderson. I was born and raised here in the Sioux and have been here for most of my 62 years. Hard to follow my impassioned wife's speech, but I'm more of a nuts and bolts and financial guy, to be honest with you. As Dana told everybody, we are working on our 5th building, hoping to tackle a 6th. We've invested probably over $1 million in buildings in the last few years downtown. So we clearly believe in Sault Ste. Marie, and we clearly believe in the form-based code. The fact that our commercial buildings in downtown are not appreciating, they are depreciating. It makes it very difficult with some of our blighted buildings, neglected buildings. Right now, by the time we finish rehabbing a building, we're in the hole, and we're not climbing out of that hole very quickly. So the form-based code, in our opinion, gives us that opportunity to see over time an increase in values in the buildings. As a business person, I'm the first person to start hollering and complaining when government tries to tell me how I can spend my money and where I can spend my money. So I'm not a big fan of intrusion, but now I can understand a little bit better. Sometimes I have to take a step back and learn that by taking a step back, I can see what we're trying to accomplish in the big picture. I think form-based code, to be quite honest with you, could bite us in the butt and in the wallet moving forward, but we feel that it will value us in the end. It's not a quick fix, as Dana had talked about. There's a wider view. You know, we have to stop looking at just our needs. We have to look at the greater good of the city, of the community. It's gonna enhance our property values. I guess I'll shorten mine up a little bit. A real life example that we'd like you guys to consider is, you know, we are currently looking at the feasibility of a new build downtown, and with current zoning ordinances, we'd have to have one parking space for every 300 square feet. Simply put, the places that we're looking at cannot accommodate that. Form-based code would help allow that on-street parking, allow some of that stuff to be applicable for us. So I'm not sure it's the total answer, but it's something that we wish you guys would consider seriously moving forward, because we just feel like that's in the end where it needs to go. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Terry. Anybody else in the audience that would like to make any comments? Sure.
I'm Sue Ann Wilkes, and I didn't have any time to prepare. We've been out of town, thankfully, in the sun. But I know we'll have a second reading, so I know we'd have time to speak to property owners and come back again, maybe with more folks as well. A couple of things that I wanted to address. When we talk about the form-based code and what it's meant to do, it's meant to attack zoning. It is a zoning code in a different way. And what I've talked to Kelly about is that this form-based code, in the way we adopt it, as opposed to things like Marquette and other places, Petoskey is not really a form-based code, it's another type of code, but is that it puts on the architectural requirements in exchange for flexibility in zoning. And we didn't do that in our code. In our code, we have areas that have all the requirements and still zoning restrictions. So I held up one of our buildings that the old mental health in the current, in the first code, the first version that we worked with Kelly on, it was only going to be housing. It literally zoned us out. While placing all the restrictions on, it zoned us out of any use of that building. It's right in the center of our tourist district, of restaurants, bars. It couldn't be any of those things. It couldn't be the Children's Museum that we pitched. It couldn't be a school building, an office building. We pitched the EUP ISD when they were looking for space and trying to expand. So we talked to Kelly about that, and he did expand some uses. So we have some flexibility, still all the architectural requirements. And I know even some other folks in this room have gone to Kelly for specific zoning consideration for their specific property, their specific address. And I really said at the meeting at that time that I was really uncomfortable with putting forth a code of people who can come to the meeting, and we talked to him as well, so I don't deny, but I approached it as these restrictions have to go. If you're going to give us the architectural restrictions, the zoning restrictions have to go. That's how you get the flexibility and how it balances out. And I'm really uncomfortable with only having a code that's created that has to have exceptions made for certain people, myself included. If the code needs exceptions right off the bat and adjustments, then we can keep working at it. And I really stand by my original comments I made to you as the commission, and I'm going to get back to you. As I said, I was just on vacation, but I went on a drive through Google in 2018. You can go on Google and drive the streets of Sault Ste. Marie in 2018. And I took snapshots of all the buildings, starting at the historic, the Ashman and Easter Day. And I drove both sides and snapped pictures. And again, I stand by the comments I made to you at the beginning. The city is not the same city. When you started this conversation in 2017, it is completely different. And I'm going to put that in a before and after and send it to all of you so you can see. I couldn't even believe the buildings that aren't notable. We're not just talking about the Alpha. We're not just talking about the Children's Museum. It's amazing the amount of change because as the money has come to town, business people do what they do. They invest their money in their buildings. Occupancy is way down. So again, I believe we're legislating something already underway and in grand style. The businesses have stepped up. And we too have done several buildings too historically and several others with upgrades. And we make our financial decisions on the cost benefit to us. I don't need any other business owner to do something to make my decision a good one. I've got to make it good on my own. And we think that's a good model for a business person to follow. I don't think we should be forcing businesses to invest in certain ways that don't make financial sense to themselves or for the benefit of any other business owner. So those are just a couple of things. I'll be more organized, but I am going to get you all, you'll be seeing a slideshow of Sault Ste. Marie 2018 and now. And I can see in 2018, while there was more concern than there should be now in 2023, 6 years. So thank you for your time. And
Thanks, Sue Ann. Anybody else in the audience that would like to make any comments? All right, we'll move to the commission. Commissioners, any questions or comments? Sure, Commissioner Rubenstein.
Director Freeman, once that threshold was eliminated, was there additional discussion around the exempt activities? And talk a little bit more about number 15, because it kind of seems counterintuitive with that threshold being eliminated and that still being in there. It's a little confusing.
Certainly. So there really wasn't a whole lot of discussion surrounding the threshold change after that the vote occurred. With number 15, if I can find where I put it here. So this number 15 was written with respect to allowing people that have vinyl siding, that have metal siding on their buildings to continue to maintain those surfaces. If a piece of siding gets broken, be it through contact with a person, snow removal equipment, ice falls off the building and lands funny and breaks it, we still want people to be able to maintain those surfaces in perpetuity. If something breaks, that need not be the trigger for suddenly having to redo your facade. And in fact, a particularly enterprising person could take advantage of that 25% to reside their entire, or replace the siding on their non-compliant areas over the course of several years. So more than likely in 20, 30 years, we'll still have vinyl siding and metal siding in the downtown. Not trying to artificially shorten its lifespan for people. Does that help?
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Commissioner Boss's-Wrath.
First off, I want to say great job to everybody that worked on this. It's very detailed. I went through it, and I mean, a couple of things, and I've had a cold too, so I sound a little raspy. You said the benefit, or somebody asked, I believe in the audience, that what would be the benefit to the city, to the residents? To me, I feel the benefit would be the preserving the historic nature of the buildings. So to me, that right there kind of speaks for itself as far as a benefit of the form-based code. The other thing I wanted to ask, the modified structure laid out and detailed the options. So can you give me examples? Say I wanted to replace my awning. Does it give me a couple options, or am I strictly going down one path of this is what you have to put up?
So if you have an existing awning and you want to replace the fabric on it because it's worn out with what is there already, you can just do that. When the time comes for the frame to come off and a brand new awning go up, it would be whatever is prescribed in the ordinance. And really the only thing that it speaks to now that wouldn't be, that's allowed now that wouldn't be allowed in the future is if you have like a circular, kind of a bubble awning,
Yep.
it's got to be over a curved window. Otherwise, they should be flat, consistent with the storefront.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Miller?
Excuse me, to expand on that a little bit then, what if the property owner doesn't take it down? What if it falls down? What if it's, with the kind of storms we get around here in winter, like what if something just falls down?
If
Are
it's
they allowed to put
something
it
that,
back up?
yeah, that would be fine.
What would they need
That-
a
that's just-
special-
that's
no,
just-
but would they have to contact somebody and get a special?
I'd personally, I'd view that as just a maintenance activity. Same as if your picnic table blows over, you pick it back up, or your shingles blow off your house, you put new shingles back up.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Anybody else? Commissioner Busta.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Director Freeman, as you mentioned in your presentation, and I've sat through Planning Commission meetings on this as a liaison, this comes with no recommendation at this point from the Planning Commission.
That's correct.
Why bring this to, is there a time sensitive, I'm just trying to understand, is there a time sensitive issue? You mentioned it going back to Planning Commission. Is there a time sensitive issue to bring this forward to full board without Planning Commission approval, recommendation?
No, it's really at the City Commission's option. Certainly, the City Commission has the ability to place any weight on that recommendation or lack thereof from the Planning Commission that it wants.
I'm going to jump in real quick.
Certainly.
The reason why the form-based code is here tonight before you is Kelly and I put together a timeline, and the only thing we didn't anticipate was a 3-3 vote at the Plan Commission. So when we sent out mailers to all the property owners that were impacted on this, we put out the whole timeline of we've got this scheduled at Plan Commission, it'll be taken up at this day, and on March 6th, it'll come to the City Commission for first reading, so please come with any comments you may have. So that's why the item is at the commission tonight. We had originally planned on tonight and the second reading the next meeting, but as we discussed, the Plan Commission came at a 3-3. It's not really clear where it is. So we're working on getting that one, but the reason why it's here tonight is because we've already told kind of the impacted property owners that it's gonna be taken up tonight. And because there is no timeline, we really didn't see, no harm, no foul in having the first reading tonight and then working towards that second public hearing after Plan Commission.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner.
May I go on with the same subject?
Sure, Commissioner Bauer.
Thanks. But it will go back before the Planning Commission April 17th, is that right, or is that wrong?
It will, yes, it will go back to Plan Commission prior to the April 17th City Commission reading, which is our anticipated second reading. So Director Freeman is working with the Plan Commission to try to get the full board. There is there's 8 of the 9 current seats filled. The last meeting, there was 2 absent. Director Freeman was trying to get in their meeting before the next scheduled commission meeting, but there was work trips and spring vacations and all that stuff planned out, so we couldn't do it. So realistically, if we shoot for a recommended motion, because the motion tonight is to have it on April 17th.
Correct.
If we don't have a Plan Commission before that, we will probably punt it one more meeting until we can have it. We do feel it's incredibly important to have the full Plan Commission board weigh in on it. There is a risk because there's only 8 bodies and 9 chairs. It could come back as 4-4, but at least it's the full board.
And if that occurred, it wouldn't change the way you feel about form-based code, would it?
Me professionally, no.
Right. And Kelly, if it did come back 4-4 or even 3-5, it wouldn't change the way that you feel about this, would it?
Correct.
So, I mean, okay. I think I made my point.
Yep. Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Rubenstein.
Just kind of to follow up on those, and Commissioner Busta, I would like to see more discussion around the threshold and that trigger being removed, and to see with public feedback and through the Planning Commission if some type of consensus can happen towards that in relation to that and the exemptions. Like I pointed out with number 15, getting rid of that threshold but still allowing for 25%. I think there does need to be leeway for existing building owners, and I also do think it's important to have form-based code in place when it comes to new buildings. So I would like to see some more discussion around that.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? Commissioner Bauer.
Yeah, actually, the bulk of what I have to say didn't have to do with that, but I wanted to say it at that time for the sake of continuity and flow of discussion. And I actually have a lot to say, but I'm not going to really get into it tonight because it's only the first reading. You know what I mean? But just some things to think about. As we've heard here from the side that is against form-based code does have its costs, and especially in a world where, where construction prices and materials are so high right now, I believe that in this environment, it would inhibit development. And, the thing is that we adopt these codes and then they're forever, and the world changes and people's opinion changes. And what we saw in the charrette, for instance, and people's opinion then, 20 years from now, people may feel differently than they felt at that time. And I want to say that when we did the charrettes for the Maloney's Alley project, none of what the people talked about at that charrette ended up being what we actually got back there, which is the Osborne Commons project. And that was based on the fact that the WODA group came in here, they had the money, they had the finances lined up, they had the plan, and they were able to do it. If we were waiting on that charrette to occur, then the Claremont Trucking building would probably still be there today. You know what I mean? As far as my own situation, And I know that my own building would not be affected by this, but when I was renovating the corner property, and I needed to put my manufacturing facility there, which is not a traditional use for that property. And when I used the siding that I used, which I believe would not be allowed under, am I correct? Right.
It would be allowed.
Oh, it would be allowed. Okay. Well, then forgive me for that, because I would have been wrong. But the whole point is, though, that if I've got more restrictions that drive up the cost of that project, then things that I wanted to do that were further, such as the rooftop deck, which again is, probably saved my business on one hand, but on the other hand is not a traditional or historically accurate use of that property by any stretch of the imagination. It's hard to be visionary, I guess, and forward thinking when we're stuck, holding on to the past. As far as the building that I think most people would consider, the pole barn type building, I wouldn't really like to see that building downtown, but it's not my decision, because it's not my property or my money doing that development. The people who are in development and people who own these properties, they're motivated by, making a profit, making money, and doing what's best for them to survive in the business world. And generally speaking, you have to consider that, nobody is going to intentionally, you would hope, put up an ugly building or something that they think, people are going to hate or is going to be, bad for their business. And we heard from Dana Sanderson, just in regards to the muffler shop comment, right? And to me, and again, maybe I'm wrong, because if I am, it wouldn't be the first time in this discussion that I've been wrong, evidently. But to me, muffler shop versus anything else is more of a use-based code discussion than a form-based code, because you can have a muffler shop that looks like a traditional building, right? You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if that's really, valid or relevant to this discussion as far as that goes. But those are just some of the thoughts that I have now, and this is only the first time around, but I would say that I am personally against form-based code. What I wouldn't mind is if we adopted something like Houghton has, where we make recommendations that you don't necessarily have to follow, but that would be something more along the lines that I would support. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner.
If I may offer one
Sure.
point of clarification,
Kelly.
if this is adopted and we find that there's something in it that we don't like or is working differently than we were hoping that it would, we can absolutely revisit it and make changes to it after the fact. We're not marrying what's in here for the next 20, 30 years. It'll be, if the commission desires, we can come back in 6 months and give a report out to see how things are going and where we need to make changes and where things are working well. I believe Marquette's 3rd Street form-based code district, they've been back into it 2 times since it was adopted, making adjustments to it. That's just a natural part of making a sweeping change like this, is you try your best to anticipate things the way that they would work or the way that they wouldn't work. And then if you find something that you don't like, you revisit it and change it to the way that it needs to be to work the way that you wanted it to. So if we do, if it is adopted, we will have the opportunity to revisit and make changes to it in the future.
Thank you, Kelly. And again, this is just a first reading of the downtown form-based code, and we'll have a second reading on April 17th, 2023, if we get a motion and support to move forward, and I'll keep my comments very brief. I am a proponent of form-based code. I've looked through all the information, sat through a lot of meetings involved with it, and prior to our discussion, have visited with many communities that had implemented form-based code. And I know, and I agree 100% with Dana, we are not any other community. We are Sault Ste. Marie. We have to have our own identity, and I think this will help us to preserve and to have some consistency in our zoning downtown. I think we're ready for it. We do have people that are developing from within, working hard on their buildings. We also have developers that are coming from without, and they are used to this type of code. And I think that the one thing that we need to talk about before the next meeting is the trigger. I think that seems to be the one thing that really people are getting caught on. So if we can resolve that. And as far as the vote from the Planning Commission, I'm not criticizing them, but they unanimously voted to remove a trigger, which made it more stringent, but then had a 3-3 vote on the passage. So little conflict there, I think. So I believe in it, and I've seen what it's done for other communities, and I think with a few tweaks, it'll be a good product going forward. And certainly, for the audience's sake, we are sitting on a memo that's really, really long, and we had 9 attachments, and we've gone through a lot of meetings, so this is a pretty informed decision. I think we've all had form-based code up to our ears right now. So, but thank you very much for your input, everybody. We certainly appreciate it, and I know that a lot of you have been in attendance at the charrettes and all the meetings, and appreciate those comments. And I know that Kelly and the group that were working on it did take them into consideration. I know there were a lot of changes that were made along the way, so we appreciate it. Who would like to make the motion to approve the first?
Here's a quick question.
Sure, Commissioner, or City Manager. You got demoted.
Just real quick, so regarding the trigger, so there has been a few comments from the commission regarding the trigger. Kelly has a couple of slides or some visuals on the trigger. If you want, we can take a couple minutes to go over the trigger, or would you prefer us to come back the next meeting or the meeting after and discuss solely the trigger?
Any thoughts? Are we form-based code out? Can you do a 2-minute and then you can expand on it?
Yeah, why don't, so
Yeah.
what we'll do is Kelly will quick run through it.
Yeah.
He'll show you the options. If you're exhausted of form-based code, we'll bring it back at the next
Okay.
meeting, but at least you've got kind of the intro to historically contributing building modification triggers.
We're this far in.
Might as well keep going.
Sorry, Bruno.
So this is a list of contributing buildings in the downtown historic district. Their replacement costs based on the assessor's data. The 50% replacement cost trigger that Mr. Wilkes is a proponent of. The total cash value trigger that I had originally suggested, and then the difference between the two. So under Mr. Wilkes' arrangement, this would be the amount of money put into these respective buildings before those preservation standards would kick in. And under the total cash value trigger, which is basically, let me flip over to that real quick. This I'd kind of devised basically allowing a bit more room, so it would be the total cash value combined with the multiplier to have a trigger value, with that multiplier getting smaller as the building value went up. So by the time you got to something like the Ojibwe, which has a total cash value of almost 3.3 million, any more than that, and you'd have to comply with the preservation standards. So those are kind of the two options presented. I'm fine with either of them. They are kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But those were the two options presented to the Planning Commission before they decided on option 3, which is to eliminate that trigger altogether.
And Kelly, just so the commissioner understands, where does the TCV number comes from?
So it's basically, it's a number that the assessor calculates based on the age of the building, its condition, and a couple other factors. So these were the two options presented to the Planning Commission. Obviously, they decided to go a different route.
Thank you, Holly. All right, do we have a motion, Commissioner Rubenstein, would you like to make a motion to?
Motion to approve the first reading of the proposed downtown form-based code and schedule a second reading for the April 17th, 2023 City Commission meeting.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any questions or comments? We could get a roll call, please.
Mayor Gary,
Yes.
Commissioner Bauer,
No.
Commissioner Bospis Rath,
Yes.
Commissioner Habusta,
No.
Commissioner Marble,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
No.
Commissioner Rubenstein.
Yes.
Motion passed on a 4-3 vote. So we'll have a second reading on April 17th at our next, at April 17th meeting. Thank you very much, everybody, for your patience. Sure, Commissioner Miller.
Sorry about that. I should have put my hand up when you were asking for comments, but regardless of whether you support this form-based code or if you're an opponent of it, whatever, it's very intricate. You did a lot of work, Kelly, everyone who worked on it. I mean, thank you for it. Even though I'm opposed to it, I know how hard it was, and I know how much work you put into it. And thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Commissioner. We'll move on into F, Communications. And this one is from Commissioner Miller. I think we'll ask City Manager. Okay, Commissioner Miller, this is your item, presentation from Sioux Eagles.
Not going to the city manager first?
Nope.
Me first? No, I got form-based code in my brain. I had a bunch of comments to make. I reached out to we've been talking about the Puller Stadium for so long. I was appointed to the city commission in December of 2017, and we were talking about getting the concession stand up and running back then. I mean, now it's 2023. Brian, I appreciate the update that you gave us. Was it last meeting or 2 meetings? 2 meetings ago, I think it was 2 meetings ago. I really appreciated that, but it's really easy for us to point out all the problems there and how much it's going to cost. And so I reached out to the Sioux Eagles tonight, a couple of their representatives. It's not really a presentation they're going to give. They're just going to talk a little bit about what they see and what happens down there. They're leasing the building for us. I also wanted to reach out to the Hiawatha Skating Club, who is another large organization there. I had no contact information for anyone from the Hiawatha Skating Club, so I'm sorry that that I couldn't offer the invitation to someone from there. If somebody from the Eagles would like to just, I don't want any of our comments tonight, mine or anybody else's, it's not a criticism, it's not the people that work down there are great. It just seems like it's maybe, a long time ago. I think we should have had a maintenance program down there, and I think it should have been better run a long time ago. None of us were here then, but. Hi, Bruno.
Well, thank everybody for having me here. My name is Bruno Brugniola. I'm the general manager for the Sioux Eagles. This is my 12th year here. And there's just two different things I'd like to talk about. First is the concession situation. I know this current administration pretty much inherited it. They didn't have really anything to do with it beforehand. I believe it was 3 years, maybe a little over 3 years ago. We made a presentation to the city commission here to do agreement that we would, 2 years prior, let me go back. We were running concession for about 8 years. 2 years prior to when we made this presentation, we were, the previous administrator, Parks and Rec administrator, kept telling us that the fire department, the fire chief, has put a lot of pressure on the city to get a new hood system installed. So it came to a point where we had to do it. So we made a presentation saying that we would buy the hood and the city would install it under a 5-year term agreement, lease agreement. So we did that. It was accepted. I left here, and I didn't hear anything for about 2 or 3 weeks. And like I said, this current administration really has no knowledge of this. I just kind of want to set the timeline, the story straight a little bit. So in the meantime, I started doing work. I've been in concession business and construction my whole life, so I started doing some research and I contacted a company called Hood Mart in Pennsylvania. That's all they do is hoods for restaurants. And they made me take dozens of pictures, dozens of measurements, the equipment, everything. I did all that, sent it in, and I contacted the premier administrator before and told him what was going on, because I said I haven't heard anything from anybody as far as getting any direction on this. So I went ahead, I told him what I did. He said, oh, great. He goes, send me the specs when they're done. So I got the specs from the company. I forwarded it to him. Still didn't hear anything for 2 or 3 weeks. So I contacted him again. I said, is it good to go? Because I said I'd like to, pay for this thing and get it shipped. Because we were already into, I believe it was like late June at the time. So he said he's working on it. I guess he was having a city engineer or somebody look at it, and, another week goes by, and he said, go ahead, order it. So we had it ordered, and it was shipped to the puller. And he said he would start working on getting contractors to do estimates to install it. So at the time, I don't even believe we had a city manager there in the process. But, I was called one day saying that they were told by the city engineer that they won't be able to use the hood because there wasn't enough clearance above the ceiling. And I knew there was, because that's one of the measurements the hood guy had me take. But I guess whoever went to do an estimate there, because I couldn't get names of who was doing estimates. I couldn't get estimates, period, even though me and the other owner, Ron Lavin, asked for it several times. But anyway, I guess when they measured the front of the concession, and it was only 11-inch clearance. I believe you have to have 16-inch clearance. But if they would have looked in the trap door on the side of the concession in the hallway, they would see that the bleachers go up on an angle, and it was roughly almost 3.5, 4 feet clearance at that point where the new hood would be installed. So we had a meeting. The city engineer came down, the fire chief came down, and the previous fire chief came down, and they went up and looked and inspected, and the city engineer came down and said, yes, there's enough clearance. So we were back to getting estimates for the installation part. I believe the first estimate that the previous administrator told us was like $36,000 to have the new hood put in. I'm not, but he said the city didn't have it budgeted at the time. So I talked to the hood company out of Pennsylvania. He said that installation should only cost about $15,000 at the time. Shouldn't be more than $15,000 for what needed to be done. Well, time went on, another company came in, gave different estimates, and it was kind of, I guess, shelved for a while. The new administration came in, started working on it again, which we appreciate, and, they come to the conclusion that it was going to cost, they had other estimates that were ridiculous. I was told again that the hood couldn't work. It was missing a part. Our other owner said he would pay for it was an air exchanger that they needed. It was not in the first estimate. So we got to the point where, they were looking at all the alternatives, and Mr. Chapman there, I appreciate the help. He was coming up with several different alternatives like hoodless grills and fryers and stuff. And I appreciate that. Now, I guess it's kind of like, I'm not sure where it's at or where it's going. I do know that the fryer sales from the fryers generated about 35 to 38% of our business, of our sales. So where it's at or where it's going, I really don't know, but I know as far as the last conversation I was with Mr. Chapman, they're looking into other alternatives instead of using a hood altogether, looking at ventless equipment. So, and I appreciate that, and we guess we'll just wait and see where that goes. So, I just wanted to set the story straight, because I think we got a couple of meetings ago, I think there was a little negative light shown on the concession there, and I don't think that's the case right now. They inherited a problem, and we all have to try to find a solution for it. There were the new fire chief came in at the beginning, did an inspection, didn't like some of the things we were doing, multi-plug inlets and all that. I believe they were showing at the last meeting. Well, that was all taken care of, and I found a way to reroute everything where we weren't blowing fuses and stuff like that. We did what the fire chief asked, and he let us, the day after, before we opened it up, he gave us the approval to open up the place. And he also gave us the approval to continue using the hood just to cook burgers, which we greatly appreciate because that's another big part of our business. So we've been running the concession for 8 years or more, and we never had one write-up, no insurance claims, nothing. We always passed all our health department inspections, paid all our bills. So, like I said, I know the city's working on finding a solution, and I guess I'm just waiting for it. And I'm more than willing to help them and work with them in any way possible. So that's all I have to say about that. The other thing that kind of maybe bothered me a little bit last couple meetings ago was the real negative light that was put on the Puller Stadium. And not only did I feel it, I got several phone calls and spoke to several people about it. So I'm not here to be negative. I like to put a positive spin on the Puller, because I think that's what it needs. I've been playing and coaching hockey for over 50 years. I've been in hundreds of rinks throughout North America and Europe. And I'm going to tell you right now, that place there is a jewel. It is a jewel of a place. I know a lot of people appreciate it. I don't think enough people appreciate it enough. Whenever people come in from out of town tournaments, they're in awe of the place. They just love it, and they want to play at that rink. It's got an unbelievable atmosphere. Bob Kalia, God bless his soul, did a hell of a lot of work to raise money and renovate the rink and give us a little bit modern, new glass, new boards, new scoreboard, and all the people, and he raised all that money from the people in this town, and he did a great job because it still had a newer feeling. It updated a lot of stuff, but it still had that old-fashioned feeling here. Like I said, I've been here 12 years, and I love Sault Ste. Marie. I'm from Chicago, and believe me, every time I go back to Chicago, I dislike Chicago more and more after being in a great little town like this. I plan on retiring here, God willing, and I think that, like I said, I want to change negative to positive here as far as the Puller goes. And I'm not sure if everybody understands what kind of situation what kind of place it is there, and the positives in it. Okay, earlier I know we're talking about the cost, the problems that they have mechanically and stuff like that, and I know that they do exist, and I know that they're very expensive to fix. But new technology nowadays, I think there's a lot of other options. I've heard some of the stuff, some of the cost of the building. And, we have a man on our staff, a coach on our staff, Fedorov, who owns the rink in Petoskey there, Harbor Springs. He bought it about 5 years ago. He spent millions of dollars renovating. He basically renovated from scratch. It's a beautiful facility. The ice is beautiful, perfect. He did, and he took classes. He's educated about running a hockey operation, a hockey rink, skating arenas as anybody I know. He also had Bob Bishop's company come up, who also take care of Lake State, I believe, and the Big Bear. They do the maintenance on his rink, periodic maintenance and any work like that. And he's in constant contact with him, and he learns a lot from a lot of different things. This year, the problems we had earlier in the year was, first there was a fog problem. The game was started, and they had to be called off in the first period by the referees. And I blame the referees for that, because I believe that game could have been played if they would have. I don't know how many are familiar with hockey, but early in the year, in almost any rink across America, except if they have a real good humidifier system, especially in the olden days, it used to be fog, So the players would all skate around in a circle, and the fog would lift. And the referees, for some reason, didn't want to do that, even though the commissioner asked them to. They didn't do it, so for safety reasons, they called the game. Now, the Puller has 4 fans on top on its roof. Okay, so they tried running that, and that didn't seem to work. But since I've been here, I looked into the history of the puller, and I seen that they used to have ice here all summer long. They had summer hockey camps. I even have a picture of a big banner in front of the puller, summer ice, sign up for summer ice, summer hockey camps. So I asked some of the older guys that worked there before, previously that worked in the puller. I did a lot of research and a lot of studying on this. And they told me that, I said, how did you have ice in the summer with the heat and everything, and especially with the older, and I think at the time they had less compressors there. I think they had two instead of three. And he goes, we used the fans on the top of the roof. I said, well, they used it and didn't seem to work. He goes, well, I said, two blow in. The two ones in the middle were blowing in, two ones out, and the outside were blowing out. And the two that were blowing in was taking heat from the outside. They were actually melting a little bit, melting the ice, the center ice. And he said, no, that's not how it works. He goes, they're all supposed to blow out. He goes, they would suck out the fog, and we would let it run 5-10 minutes, get this building, get it out of there, have the kids skate around in circles, and then the fog would dissipate, and then, when it built up again, we would do it again. So I said, well, how come, I was confused as to why he said all the fans blew outward. They sucked the air out. He told me that's what they did. So I'm not sure. I know they did work to the roof when they renovated the puller. I had one of them tell me maybe they rewired the two middle ones to blow in and the out ones to blow out. But, I presented that to Tyler, and I guess he was going to check into it and see what the situation is. I do believe if they had ice in the summer there several years ago, and long in the past, I believe that, and they were able to continue to keep the ice and operate with it and take care of the humidity that way. I think that should be looked into. Maybe I could be wrong. Maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. But I talked to a couple of the old timers, and they were pretty positive that's how they did it. So those things, I think that's one thing I think should be looked into. If they rewired them, one of the previous contractors should come and fix the situation. So anyway, we have Feder on our staff, and when the second situation we had, the chilling tower on the outside of the building was having some problems with the belt, broke down, so we had to cancel a second game the following week. And Feder, he put a brand new chilling tower in his building, state of the art. But before that, he had the old one completely renovated and refurbished. And he offered that. He said, if we can't get it going, he goes, I'll give that to the city for free. And he still has that offer on the table to if that tower needs to be replaced. And I guess it handles a bigger workload, the tower he has there too. So that's available if the city ever comes where they need a new one, he'd be willing to, offer something to them with that. He said the two biggest things that he thinks that, the biggest thing he thinks that the pullers should get if they really want to do something, and you know what? And I'd be willing to even forget about the fryers if the city wanted to invest it into this building and make it more efficient. He said it needs a dehumidifier system, okay? And I think he said that would solve all the dripping. It would make the building last another 30, 40 years without any problems, okay? When we were in the North America League several years ago, we were in Janesville playing. They had a dehumidifier system, but the rink is a smaller ceiling, and it was a sock that ran all the way from one end to the other. I was just talking to their manager there, and he told me that they were getting rid of it because it was made for arenas with higher ceilings. So I said, oh, you know what? I'll give that to. I got his name, number, gave it to previous administrator, told him that they were willing to sell it for pennies on the dollar, and for whatever reason, nothing ever came of it. Okay, the guys were never contacted. Nothing. It was just kind of shelved. But I think there are systems out there that could be bought at a discount that would pretty much solve a lot of problems that the puller has. It takes a lot of stress off the compressors. It takes a lot of stress off the building, the integrity of the building itself. You want, the painted. They spend a lot of money painting the beams up there. They're getting rusty from the humidity and the condensation. Then they drip on the ice, and they make yellow spots on the ice, rust spots and bumps and everything. But the guys there have done a great job of being able to, keep the ice going and keep it keep it, just keep it smooth and keep it going. So, that was one of the biggest things that he said that if he owned that rink, that's the first thing he would do to improve everything all the way around. And I know the last meeting they were talking about, the costs involved in breaking the concrete, putting new piping system in, and it's very expensive. But like I said, there's new technologies out there. And I spoke to Bob Bishop and also with Feder on the matter, and like one of the new technologies they have a pad. It's about 2 inches thick. It's got piping inside, and you put it in in pieces. It would take about a day for 2 men to put it in. 4 guys working on it, you could do it maybe a day or 2 days with 2 guys working. 4 men could probably be quicker than that. They would have to do a connection to the current compressor system and freezing system. They would have to find a place to hook it up. They'd probably have to break the floor somewhere to do that. But as far as breaking the floor in that building with the jackhammers and the machinery you would have to bring in and pound it, I agree. I used to be in construction a little bit too, a long time ago in concrete, actually. That concrete they made there was built to last 1,000 years at the puller. They don't make it like that anymore. And it would take them, I think, longer to break. It would be more expensive in the long run. And I think it would do a lot of damage to the integrity of the building, just the vibration. It's an old building. I don't think all that shaking and pounding would help the building. So I just think there's other alternatives that if it ever gets to the point where they need to do something like that, I think there are other things that can be done. Because I think you want to keep that concrete floor at all costs. So, and the other thing is about the budget on the puller that, loses money, this and that. And, I don't disagree with that. I'm not a financial guy. I'm not an expert in that by no means. I do know that a lot of the loss is from the salaries in the building. And those are the same guys that go out and work the parks in the summer. So I got to believe that the parks lose money too if it's budgeted the same way. But I think people have to look at the puller as an amenity, not just like the park system. The puller, just the puller alone during the few months that it's open, half the year that it's open, it generates an unbelievable amount of business and money and revenue for all the businesses in this town. Our team alone, we did a analysis on how much money our team generates to the city of Sault Ste. Marie alone. It's well over $800,000. They had a Katie Robinson tournament there a couple of weeks ago that was phenomenal. I guarantee you that they probably brought in over $1 million worth of business to the business owners in this town. So I think the puller, you have to look at it as the value that it presents. Not only just the puller, the Norris Center, Big Bear. These hockey tournaments are great money generators for the business in the city. So maybe the puller does lose money, but by having it there, it generates an unbelievable amount of money to help keep the businesses going in this town, which I believe the city gets taxes off of too and stuff. So, I've been there 12 years, and like I said, I'm not a business expert by no means, but I do know things that work, things that I've done have worked, and I've been in rinks my whole life. I worked at, I have a concession stand in a rink in Chicago with a little bar upstairs. I've had rinks and concessions basically my whole life. Besides work construction, I go there at night and take care of that. So I do know, I've watched other rinks and see what they do and see what works and doesn't work. Now, everything changes every year. 10 years ago, what worked then may not work now, but I still think certain things are worth trying. And some ideas I've put out since I've been here to the city, and I think the main thing, I'll go right to the point, I think there has to be somebody in charge to run the puller. And I think their main job to be not only daily operations, but to generate business all year round. And I knew, though, that I believe the city did have, you could correct me if I'm wrong, I think they did have an ad in the paper last year trying to hire somebody to get special events going there.
I think we did.
There was an ad in the paper looking for somebody
RFP or something like
to
that,
hire
wasn't it?
to do special events at the city. But I think that's what they need. Now, I know that takes a special person to do it, but, ideas that that could be utilized during during the whole year for the puller. Like I said, I've done a lot of research, and I went back, and the puller was like a big community center. It was open all year round. They had all kind of things going on all year round. Even when they did take the ice out, things were going on all year round, and it generated money in a lot of different ways, and I still think it could. I'll give you an example. At Fetter's rink in April, he's having a gun show there, and it's going to bring in $25,000 of profit for him. Okay? Just things like that. But I know you need somebody to get on the phone, promote. You need a promoter. You need somebody that's good at doing that kind of stuff. Other things that could be done, ball hockey's a big thing, especially being on the Canadian border. You could have ball hockey leagues, ball hockey tournaments. You could have indoor soccer. You could have indoor lacrosse. You could have the UP's biggest indoor flea market there on weekends. I measured out spaces, basically, in the pulley. You could probably get close to, depending on how much space and the sizes, between 80 to 100 vendors in there. You never have to worry about being rained out. It's always cool in there. You could charge the vendors $80 a weekend. Go to the city. You could charge $1 admission if you want. With all the tourists that this town gets this summer, and believe me, people love flea markets. In Chicago, they take the Horizon, Rosemont Horizon big stadium. They have it outside. They probably have 800 vendors there. And it is packed every single weekend. This one, they don't even have to worry about rain. Never going to get rained out. It stays cool in there. I think that would be a good thing to look into. A movie night would be really good. I know they tried it on the boat, the Valley Camp next to us there. I think a couple of summers ago they used to have movie night there once a week, and that equipment, I believe, Linda Holt, I believe she ran that. I believe that equipment is still out there, and, that's just something you could look into. Trade shows, little conventions, they used to have MMA fighting, boxing. You could do roller skating. You could have concerts, et cetera. But you needed somebody that knows that business and knows how to promote that. I could help out with like hockey tournaments during the season and ball hockey and stuff like that. I'd be more than willing to help out for free. Don't name my time for that. And the other thing I think that, I don't know if maybe they have, maybe they haven't, I don't know. But I know there's a bunch of grants out there. I don't know if anybody has ever applied for grants for the puller. It's a historic building. I would think there's numerous grants out there available or something that could be done for it. At least inquire or apply it. So, I just think that it's a phenomenal building. I think with a little more investment in it, like I said, it's as simple as putting a dehumidifier in there. I think it could be, a money generator for all the businesses in the city, and it may even get to the point where it can break even and maybe not even lose money. So,
Thank you, Bruno. Appreciate it.
Thanks for your time, and if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than willing to do my best to answer them.
Commissioner Miller, it's your item. Do you want to wrap it up?
This is going to be a really long meeting if I say everything I want to say, but thanks, Bruno. I appreciate that. Again, my apologies to the Hiawatha Skating Club, but if I would have had a contact information for somebody, I would have invited them to speak too. As far as grant money, I think, though, city manager, you can correct me if I'm wrong, most grant money that might be out there would be like for facade type stuff, wouldn't it? It's not for like equipment.
Correct.
Do you know of
For
any
the
kind
most
of?
part, they're.
Yeah. Do you know of any grants that are available for equipment? Because I don't either. Well, with your update a couple meetings ago, it's easy to see that the Puller Stadium does cost us a lot of money, but it's called it's the Puller Community Building. It's for the community, and long after the Eagles aren't there anymore, or long after some of these organizations that lease it aren't there anymore, the building's still ours. It's still a historic building, and it's still ours, and we still have to keep it up. So hopefully, moving forward, we can develop a plan and do something. In the meantime, small things that we can take care of down there, perhaps concession stand, get that up 100%. I was there for the Hiawatha Skating Show the other night, whatever. I won't get into it in detail tonight because, like I said, this meeting is going to run long. But there's lots of things that I saw that just, sorry, but it seemed like it was poorly mismanaged. And again, Nothing against anybody that works down there, because everybody down there is great. Thanks, Bruno. Thanks for the presentation.
Just real quick, I've been involved with the organization essentially since I delivered the inflatable that they used to come through at the front door. And something that if any of you ever want the opportunity to come down, I now do all the broadcasts for hockey television. Scott Nason, rest his soul, he threw that in my lap. I was his color commentator and worked with him for many years. So for me to sit above and look down, you can really see where things are falling apart and deteriorating. And I absolutely agree 100%. It's not like, well, should we do something here or there? You have to put a maintenance schedule together. I watched over the years the transformation of the new glass and the ceiling. I can tell you right now something that none of you probably think of. Go down there and inspect between that vinyl and the original roof. There's a lot of water there. The sound system in there, it's getting ruined because of the water in there. It's a Bose sound system. I'm sure at the time it was installed, it was state of the art. A lot of money. Everything in that building is going to be ruined if a maintenance schedule isn't put together, and that is your community staple piece. That building was built many years ago for a reason, and if somebody doesn't know why, look. It was built for a reason. It was designed for a reason. It was the summer training camp for the Detroit Red Wings. I mean, we don't have our logo in the middle anymore, and when I look down, we have Hockey Town. Well, it's going to collapse. That roof is going to rot above that vinyl. It's going to fall in on itself, and whoever's sitting here is going to take the brunt of it from the community. You know, I live just outside, but like I say, I've been involved since literally year one. And for me to watch these gentlemen bring in a program that they had no reason to invest money in this community, and now to watch my son stand on the ice with them, it's pretty incredible. I mean, I watched him go from the mascot to a goaltender. It was crazy. But to watch that building literally as I'm standing up there calling the game, and it looks like somebody was out there. I don't know if any of you skate, but one of the rules is if you chew, you don't spit in the ice. And that's what it looks like. There's rust everywhere, and that rust is coming from someplace. It's either coming from what's holding the roof above it, or it's coming from the beams that were painted when they did the renovation. And there's, like, I mean, it's not one of those, it really needs to be addressed, because there's things that you can't see. It's the hidden problems, I think, that are gonna be the worst in the future. And the building deserves to be preserved in its best form.
Thanks, Rob. So certainly, Puller Stadium will be a topic of conversation when we have goal setting, so we'll save it for that. And thank you, Bruno, and the entire Eagles organization. You've done a great job down there, and I agree, the Puller Hood thing has gone on too long, but I'm not blaming anybody, but certainly I know that city manager is working on resolution, and we appreciate everything you do down there. We appreciate your kids' commitment to the city of Sault Ste. Marie, and you do have a large economic impact on the community, and so does the Puller. So thank you very much.
Well, we appreciate being there, and I consider it a phenomenal honor.
Awesome.
I appreciate everything the city tries to do for us.
All right, thanks for your time. Moving on, F Communications, number 2 is a Budget 101 presentation. Maybe it'll be a .50 or something. You got 10 minutes. Just kidding.
No, you're
City
not.
manager. Half kidding.
No, you're not. All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I think this is the longest one we've had so far.
Since we're talking about hockey, we should take it.
And we're not done. Does that, I guess, you need a recess or anything? We'll plow through it? Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So about this time of year, we typically do a kind of a Budget 101. We have a short little presentation that we'll go through. Bonnie, if you want to throw my screen up for me, we'll kind of hit the highlights here, perhaps. It's Kelly's. I can't even figure out how to get out of there. Bonnie, why don't you take it off the screen so it's less awkward? Thank you. Well, you may have dodged a bullet. Hold on, let me try it one more time. Close. Yeah, for which way? Thanks, Bonnie. All right, I apologize. We will have to figure out what's wrong with it, and we will reschedule it for the next meeting. I'm not sure why
Things happen for a reason, I guess.
Kelly's PowerPoint's working, but this one is not. All right, I apologize. We will do it next meeting.
All right, so we'll move on into G, business items. Number 1, City Manager Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Up first, maybe? Come on. All right, sorry, my computer was not working again. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Up first for commission consideration is a approval of the sources and uses for the Carbide Dock Port in Easterday Avenue project. Within the attachment highlights a lot of the sources and uses. The new sources and uses reflect some of the grants that we have received. The only thing you really approve in is kind of the budget for the project. So we look for a motion to amend the budget as presented.
Thank you, City Manager. Any questions or comments on this item? Commissioner Marvel, would you, how many,
Just one.
would you like to make the motion?
Motion to amend the budget for the Carbide Dock Easterday Truck Route project is presented to show added grant revenue per revised source and use.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Are there any questions or comments? Commissioner Busta.
Yeah, just to clarify, the Michigan Spark grant, as released by the DNR, showed reflected that was for the Alfred Park project. Is that included as part of the Carbide Dock project?
Correct.
Thank you.
But I don't know, let me just. The Alfred Park is part of the Carbide Dock project, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? It has been moved and supported, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously. G, business items, number 2, City Manager Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Up next for commission consideration is a follow-up item for professional services related to a project plan for the Clearwater State Revolving Fund Program. This is related to the PowerPoint we gave the commission last meeting, I believe it was. 2 motions for this item: motion to amend the project budget for $96,500, and a motion to authorize the amended contract with Donahue and Associates. And again, this item is going to secure us the project plan that is required for the wastewater treatment plant to be eligible for Eagle CWSRF funding, which has received a large influx of cash from the various federal acts that have pushed money down to the states. This part is a required component of the process before we can figure out, or before the Eagle can figure out for us what size of grant and loan forgiveness we would be eligible for. So 2 motions: motion to amend the project budget, and motion to authorize the contract as presented by Donahue and Associates.
Thank you, City Manager. Any questions or comments on this item this evening? Commissioner Abusta, would you like to make the motions? 2
Sure.
separate motions.
Motion to amend the project budget with an increase of $96,500 to be funded by the Sewer Capital Reserve Fund.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed. Commissioner Busta.
Motion to authorize the city manager to sign the amended contract as presented by Donahue and Associates.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously. G, business items number 3, City Manager Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Up next for commission consideration is a request for professional services for bridge inspections throughout the city. This is a program that we do every other year. The amount is $16,500. The company will come in, Ayers Associates will come in and inspect all of the bridges as related to MDOT's bridge grant program. So we look for motion to award the professional services to Ayers Associates, the amount of $16,500.
Thank you, City Manager. Any questions or comments on item 3? Commissioner Bauer?
So moved that we award the professional services requested to Ayers Associates in the amount of $16,500.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Item number 4, City Manager Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Up next for commission consideration is a request to purchase smart cover subsonic sewer flow meters and related equipment for the water utility or the sewer utility. This particular item is a single sole source item. Currently within the sanitary collection system, we have several flow meters. They're not operational, they're older. To repair one is about $6,500 to just buy an it would cost $6,500 to repair or $7,200 to replace. These new smart meters will actually replace the manhole covers throughout the city and certain locations. It'll capture the flow, the depth, the velocity, and then through a wireless system, send that information to staff. So we'll be able to pinpoint inflow and infiltration a lot more quicker. We will be able to forecast potential flooding events in some of our CSO areas. This purchase is really going to help us finalize some of our combined sewer overflow work throughout the city that we're working on for Eagle. After we clear the CSO requirements through Eagle, we will continue to use these meters to again identify I&I and help us kind of find a plan attack for some of those issues. So we did do some due diligence and make sure this is what we needed and would fit our needs the best. But it is a sole source. There's one vendor that sells it in the state of Michigan. So we have 3 motions. Motion to suspend the competitive bid process, motion to approve the purchase, and contingent on 1 and 2, motion to authorize a budget amendment for $35,000.
Thank you, City Manager. Does anybody have any questions or comments? And again, it's a single source vendor, so we have to waive the competitive bid process. Commissioner Bospis-Rath, since there are 3 separate items. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Busta.
You say single source vendor, but then you also added within Michigan. So can you clarify that? Are there other vendors outside of Michigan that sell this?
There are other vendors outside of Michigan, but they're not authorized to deal in Michigan.
Okay, thank you.
In order to waive the competitive bid process, it must be unanimous vote of the commission. So, Commissioner Miller.
They're not authorized to operate in the state of Michigan, but by who?
Huh?
Who tells them they can't operate in Michigan? I mean, who tells them that somebody else can't operate in Michigan?
So I mean, it's kind of like I would say General Motors is a comparable, right?
Mhm.
General Motors produces vehicles, they sell them to dealers. With those contracts, they have agreements with the dealers that you can't put up another General Motors dealership so close to another one, right? To maintain those territories. So the company that produces these has vendor agreements with other companies, and within those, they guarantee those territories. So if they have a contract with a vendor, Michigan is their thing, and they could have another one that's Ohio or Minnesota, whatever the case may be. So it's a region protection for these vendors. That way they, they don't have to worry too much about competition, but.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions? Commissioner Boswell.
Motion to suspend the competitive bid process.
Support.
Been moved and supported to suspend the competitive bid process. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yes, opposed.
Motion dies. I want to do a quick review of the charter, but I believe if...
Is that correct, Robin?
Yes.
Okay. Motion dies.
All right, moving on into business items number 5. City Manager Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Up next for commission consideration is agreement for professional service related to the fire station remodel. The commission will recall we socked away about $250,000 of our ARPA funding for the remodel of the upstairs fire hall, primarily related to expanding the bathrooms and some of the living facilities. This particular item was bid out in its entirety several months ago, with each kind of component being awarded to SIDOC. So this next step is to approve the professional services to move forward with construction drawings and bid documents with SIDOC in the amount not to exceed $28,400.
Thank you very much. Any questions on this item for the city manager? Commissioner Miller, would you like to make the motion?
Sure, thank you, Your Honor. Motion to approve the professional services to move forward with the construction drawings and bid documents for the construction of the fire hall crew quarters for an amount not to exceed $28,400 and allow the city manager to sign.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Any questions, comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Under G, business items number 6.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Up next for commission consideration is a request to submit a staffing for adequate fire and emergency response grant to FEMA. Shorthand is SAFER. This particular grant application would be submitted to add on 6 additional personnel to the fire department. The specifics of the grant program are outlined within your agenda memo, as well as a financial breakdown. The grant covers all wages and benefits, excluding any unscheduled overtime and outfitting costs. So the city would still be on the hook for buying the turnout gear and all the necessary equipment to properly equip the personnel. So we look for a motion to apply for the SAFER grant as presented.
Thanks, city manager. Any questions, comments on this item? Sure, Commissioner Hobusta.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question I had involved the cost of the outfitting and overtime. Is that already a budgeted expense?
No, we would have to include that either, what the heck? Either as, it just moved on me, I'm sorry. So estimates about $41,400 for outfitting costs. We would either put that into the budget for next year, or if we weren't sure when we were going to hire these individuals, we could ask for an amendment with the commission at the time. But it's not going to be, the application is going to be coming in. I think it's due in the next week or two. Grant award probably won't be till September, October-ish, so it's going to be in the next fiscal year. So we can handle it one of 2 different ways. If we get the sense that we're going to be received, we can budget for next fiscal year in the current budget that we're developing, or we can do a budget amendment with the commission when we bring the executed grant agreement to the commission for acceptance.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Rubenstein, would you like to make the motion?
Motion to submit a FEMA staffing for adequate fire and emergency response, known as SAFER grant for 6 personnel for the grant period of performance.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Any questions or comments before we vote? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Business items number 7, City Manager Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Up next is a request from LSSU for local support for a liquor control license for the Norris Center. There's a couple attachments in the agenda item for you. Typically, we would put this on the consent agenda, but as a couple of the commissioners do work for LSSU right now, we've put it out in the business for full vote. And so you can abstain. So, pretty routine. Staff has no concerns with it, so we look for a motion to approve the resolution as attached.
Also, we have Steve Betts here from LSSU. Thank you for enduring a long meeting, and if we have any questions for him, he's in the audience. So any statements from commissioners or questions, Commissioner Bauer?
They also carry my product, so am I allowed to vote on this?
If you don't, we're done. No, we have 4 left. 1, 2. Yeah, we'd have 4.
You got 4?
We'd have 4.
I would abstain.
So would I.
Okay, so you're making the statement
That's why I
that,
brought it up.
okay. Commissioner Busta, did you have a statement to make? Are you going to,
Yeah, I'll be abstaining as I work directly for Lake Superior State University and the Norris Event Center.
okay, Commissioner Rubenstein?
Yep, I'll be abstaining as well. Work for Lake Superior State.
All right, so any questions or comments? We'll be looking for a unanimous vote with the remaining 4, so, Commissioner Miller, would you like to make the motion?
Sure, thank you, Your Honor. I went to Lake State, but that was like 50 years ago, so I don't have to abstain, right? I'm okay. Motion to approve the MLCC local government approval resolution request from LSSU as presented.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Any questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed. Thank you very much. Under business items, number 8, City Manager Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next 2 items are just requests to go into closed sessions as permitted by the Open Meetings Act. The first one is to discuss collective bargaining, and the second one is to discuss settlement strategies related to ongoing litigation. So both items, we would look for a motion to approve the closed sessions. We do not anticipate coming out of closed session for any action. It's just getting direction from the commission.
Commissioner Marble, would you like to make the first motion to enter into closed session for collective bargaining?
Motion to enter a closed session to describe, connection with negotiation and collection bargaining agreements.
Is there support?
Support.
Has been moved and supported. Then we move into closed session, not to return after this meeting is done. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Also, Commissioner Marble, would you like to make the same motion for number 9, which is the second request?
Motion to enter into a closed session for strategy and negotiation sessions connected with, I'm on the same page.
That's good enough. That's a hard one to pronounce. Is there support?
Support.
Been moved and supported. We move into closed session. Again, any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion passed. We will move into closed session at the conclusion of this meeting. Moving into H, City Manager announcements and updates. City Manager.
I have got nothing for tonight.
All right. Under item I is matters presented by the public. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to make any comments at this time? Lots of smiles. Item J is matters presented by the City Commission. Anything from the City Commission? Commissioner Boswas-Rath.
Just want to say good luck to Sioux High girls basketball tomorrow. They play for the regional championship. So good luck, girls. And if anybody goes down, I know there is a fan bus going down I'm not sure what time because I believe the game is early, but that's tomorrow. So good luck, Sioux High girls basketball.
Where are they playing?
I think Gaylord.
Okay.
So drive safe.
Good luck, Blue Devils. Anybody else have anything? Commissioner Miller?
You don't need to rub it.
On a lighter note, I just want to say happy birthday to my brother tomorrow. It's his birthday, and I know he watches our meetings. And if he's not sleeping right now, happy birthday, Kim.
Happy birthday. Anybody else? Commissioner Bauer.
So move that we adjourn this meeting and enter into closed session.
Support.